This video is a demonstration that what Jordan Peterson says is actually nonsense, considering that he is not a Christian and does not hold to the Christian worldview. And so the things he says, because they're not couched in Christianity, because he's not preaching the truth of Christianity at the same time, they can either be applied to Hitler's situation, or they are inconsistent with his own belief system about the true nature of reality. They're inconsistent with his belief in an evolutionary process by which human beings came about. And I don't believe he believes in, he does not believe in the one true God. Maybe he believes in some kind of deist God, some kind of higher power that started everything. I don't know. But all it's needed to demonstrate what I'm demonstrating is, all it's needed is the understanding that he does not hold to the Christian worldview, and therefore any God he believes in is a non-existent God, and there's no revelation from that God that we can look to say, well, this is actually right, this is actually wrong. It's basically, well, there's a bunch of human opinions about what's right and wrong, and we go with a consensus, or who's ever in power, or it's just me and myself and I, and each individual determines their own morality. I mean, that's what you're led to without Christianity. And so Jordan Peterson is not a Christian. He does not believe in Christianity, and therefore any God he might believe in, he has no revelation from. Like, even in his own worldview, there's no written revelation he could point to and say, here's the propositions written down that I can learn from and therefore justify my moral claims. He cannot do that. He's stuck with human opinions. So I'm going to start the video. This is a video full of inspirational, motivational quotes, and we will see here how many of them could be used in a utilitarian way by Hitler. And what Jordan Peterson actually does is just give a utilitarian understanding of how you can go from point A to point B, but there's no why, and ultimately that can be justified. There's no moral claim that can be the foundation that can help us understand why ultimately are we doing all these things, and who determines what's right or what's wrong. And so I'm going to explain as the video plays and he gives these different quotes.
I can't think of a more nihilistic idea than that you're already okay. It's like, no, you're not. And the reason you're not is because you could be way more than you are. And so what do you want to be? You want to be okay as you are? Or do you want to strive towards what's better? Human beings are insufficient in and of themselves and need the movement upward. And so they need to conceptualize something like the highest good and then to strive for that.
Well, who determines what the highest good is? The highest good could be just what it's just for his worldview. To be consistent, you have to say it's just whatever your opinion is, whatever is good for you, whatever's best for you. And so if Hitler adopted that ideology, he could say, hey, what's best for me is to get all of the Jews exterminated, because I don't like Jews, Hitler would say. And Hitler could easily say, what's best for me is eliminating all Jews. That's what I want. That's the highest good for me. And so what Jordan just said is perfectly compatible with Hitler and Hitler's a mindset that Hitler might have.
One of the things psychologists have done for the last 20 years, especially the social psychologists, is push this idea of self-esteem. You should feel good about yourself. It's like, you should feel good about who you are. It's like, no, you shouldn't. Why should you feel good about who you are? It's like, you should feel good about who you could be. But often you take young people, say they're 16 to 22, and they're not really feeling that good about who they are. Right. Because their life is chaotic and in disorder, and they don't know where they're going, and they don't know which way is up. But the thing is, it has to be stated with precision. It's like, you should treat yourself as if you're valuable, especially in potential.
Why? Jordan Peterson believes in macroevolution. He gets his psychology from evolutionary theory. He gets his ideas about psychology from lobsters and how lobsters operate. So, basically, we're animals in his conception of things. Maybe he thinks we're some kind of elevated animal, but we have to be animals in his understanding of metaphysics and his understanding of reality. We're just basically highly evolved animals.
But you should concentrate on who you should become, especially if you're young. And so let's say you're miserable and nihilistic and chaotic and depressed and all of that now, and you have your reasons, terrible parenting, abuse, all of those things. It's like you should feel good about yourself. It's more...
Well, who defines those things? Who defines what those things mean? And even if those things mean the same thing to different people, why not be nihilistic? Why not kill yourself if life is miserable? Does he have an answer to this? No, his worldview doesn't have an answer for this. What's wrong with being nihilistic, Jordan? If God hasn't commanded us to not murder, and if God has not warned us about hellfire and eternal consequences for murderers, why not kill yourself?
Or like you should understand how much potential there is within you to set that straight. And then you should do everything you can to manifest that in the world, and it will set it straight. And that's better than self-esteem. So I'm telling young...
So we should set it straight. Well, what if somebody thinks that straight is being nihilistic? Maybe they're a nihilist. Maybe they want to kill themselves. Why shouldn't they? If their life is agony, and that's what they want for themselves, and that's what they see as the highest good, then why wouldn't they chase that? There's no answer to this in Jordan's worldview. The Christian worldview says God's glory is the highest good, obeying God is the highest good, and Jesus Christ is the truth, and we should shoot and aim for obedience to God and glorifying God. That's the ultimate goal for Christianity. But for Jordan, it's man-centered, it's man-based, and you end up with all these different opinions, and you have no way to tell which one is actually the correct way to go, and there's no way for Jordan to condemn or to say, well, the nihilist shouldn't do that. The nihilist shouldn't kill himself. Or the genocidal murderer shouldn't commit genocide. If that's what's best for him, why shouldn't he do it? If this person is abusive and it's good for them to abuse other people and that's the highest good for them, why not justify their actions and say, well, for them it was painful for them to not abuse people, so they were just acting according to their desire to escape pain. Because people do want to abuse people, and so how do you tell those abusers that they shouldn't abuse if there's no command from God to not abuse people? If there's no hellfire to escape, if there's no image of God in people that you should respect out of reverence for the Creator. I mean, if people are animals, highly evolved animals, what's wrong with abusing them? I mean, Jordan probably kills mosquitoes when he drives his car. That's abusive. So Jordan abuses animals. He abuses insects when he travels. So why is that okay? But then it's wrong to abuse highly evolved animals like humans in Jordan's worldview. It's just so inconsistent. It's just so bizarre. This is all just so foolish.
People, look, no matter how bad your situation is, I'm not going to pretend it's okay. It's not okay. It's tragic, tainted with malevolence. And some people...
Who determines what's tragic? Who determines what malevolence is? Maybe Hitler could claim that the Jews were malevolent, and that just existing was malevolence towards Germans, or the Third Reich. Like, who determines what these things mean? There's no way to know without a Christian epistemology. You just have millions of different opinions about different things, and there's no objective standard that applies to everyone that you can measure everyone by. God's law applies to everyone. God's going to judge everyone by his law on Judgment Day, and that's the objective standard. That's why it's objective, because God's going to use it to judge everyone and give them punishment or reward on Judgment Day. He's going to use his law. He's going to apply his law to everyone. God's law applies to everyone. That's why God's morality is objective. When you don't have that, you have a bunch of different human opinions, and each opinion is just as good as the other, because there's no measuring stick by which to measure them. There's no objective standard to measure them by.
really get hurt by malevolent people, like, terribly hurt. Sometimes they never recover. It's really awful. But there's more to you than you think. And if you stand up and face it with a positive, with a noble vision, with discipline and intent, you can go far farther to overcoming it than you can imagine. And that's the principle upon which you should predicate your behavior. What you can do to begin with is every bloody thing you possibly can do to put yourself in the most virtuous and powerful negotiating position possible.
Virtuous? Who determines what virtue is? Hitler could say virtue is exterminating Jews. Hitler could say, well, for me, being virtuous is destroying people who I believe are a threat to society. How do you deal with Hitler, Jordan?
And you have to think like a snake in some sense. To do that, you got to get the details right. You have to be prepared to bite, and you have to have your eyes on the prize, so to speak. The best way to present yourself is to stand up forthrightly.
And there, I think he's talking about bite in what he believes to be a virtuous sense, but then Hitler wants to bite the Jews, and how do you tell him, no, don't bite the Jews? If Hitler wants to act like a snake in his own way, why not? Without God's revelation of God's law to restrict Hitler, what are you going to do, Jordan?
And to stretch out, and to occupy some space. And you make yourself sort of vulnerable by doing that because you open up the front of your body, right? But it's a sign of confidence. And that way people are most likely to give you the benefit of the doubt. And that's a good way to start regulating your mood. But not only does it directly regulate your mood to stand up, because it's so tightly associated, like postural flexion is associated with serotonin and emotional regulation, but also because if you straighten up and you present yourself in that manner, then other people are more likely to take you seriously. And that means they'll start treating you as if you're a number 1 lobster instead of a number 10 lobster.
Whoop, lobsters. Likening humans to lobsters. There's his evolutionary psychology coming through, his macroevolutionary psychology. And so humans are maybe we're just big lobsters. Maybe we're just the equivalent of giant lobsters that have more highly evolved brains. I mean, that's basically his worldview. If Hitler wants to improve his relationships with other people by standing up straight and acting confident, who are you to tell him no, Jordan? You just gave Hitler some advice on how to improve his campaign. Because you haven't told us why Hitler can be condemned justly.
And that's another way that you can at least give yourself the bloody benefit of the doubt, right? And confront the world in a courageous manner. And that's a really good way of figuring out how to establish yourself in multiple competence hierarchies, because one of the general rules of thumb about how to be successful is to confront things that frighten you forthrightly and with courage.
Wow, maybe Hitler should forthrightly and with courage confront what scares him, the Jews. Maybe Hitler should do whatever he can to kill off the Jews that frighten him and threaten him. Maybe he should be forthright and confident in embracing that. How do you tell Hitler he can't do that, Jordan?
So you tell young people, and this is another message for conservatives, like, I don't care what you're going to do, but go out there and make something of yourself for God's sake. Be an honest person and work and get to the top of whatever it is that you want to get to the top of, and then stand up for yourself like a respectable human being and be a bit of a light on the world.
Just stand up for yourself, Hitler. Be a light to the world by killing off the Jews. See how absurd this is? No. Hitler was a wicked, evil man who violated God's law to an unbelievable extent. And we have to push God's law, or what you have in society will be genocide. It will be people taking Jordan Peterson's advice to do evil things. And Jordan gives us no antidote to this.
Instead of a blight, it's like, get yourself educated, man. Read some books, learn to talk, learn to think, make yourself into something. Get the hell out there and make the world that put you here happy that you were put there.
Maybe Hitler's like, oh yes, I need to make the world happy that I'm here because the Jews are a threat. The Jews are going to ruin the world. The Jews are going to mess things up. The world is going to be happy once I exterminate the Jews. Eventually, everyone will see that I was right. Hitler could use Jordan Peterson.
People ask themselves all the time, what's the purpose of life? And there's a variety of answers to that. There's no purpose. We're just atoms on a dust mote at the edge of a rather reprehensible corner of the cosmos, and we exist for a moment and we're out, and that's that. If you do careful analysis of what people mean when they say they just want to be happy, what they mean is they don't want to suffer stupidly. They're much more concerned, we're much more concerned with not experiencing an excess of negative emotion than we are with experiencing a surfeit of positive pleasure. So first of all, we don't mean we just want to be happy. We mean, please don't make us too miserable. It isn't even obvious that we want absence of misery. What's really obvious is that we want an adventure. Right? We want an adventure that's so compelling that it makes the misery of life not just justifiable, but worthwhile.
The adventure. The adventure of fulfilling one's life goal to exterminate the Jewish population in the area where you live, and the goal of taking over the world to establish your racist hierarchy. I mean, how are you going to tell Hitler no, Jordan? You don't have an objective standard for morality. You believe that Hitler is just another animal. So why shouldn't Hitler just establish his dominance hierarchy through genocide?
You want to look back on your life, and you know this to be true. You want to be able to say to yourself, even considering a month or a week or...
How could Jordan say that the Holocaust was wrong if humans are just animals? Like, why is exterminating 6 million Jews different than exterminating 6 million mosquitoes in Jordan Peterson's worldview? In Jordan Peterson's worldview, there's no image of God to protect and to defend and to reverence, or at least respect. In the Christian worldview, humans have innate value. Through being created in the image of God, we represent God, and we're not animals. Jesus said that humans are more valuable than sparrows, that we're more valuable than many sparrows. So there's a human creature distinction in a biblical worldview that can help us understand how to treat animals, how to treat humans, and how there's a difference. But if Jordan is comparing us to lobsters and believes that we evolved out of creatures that were at one time like lobsters, perhaps, he has no way of saying that humans have any more value than lobsters.
A series of days, you want to be able to say, that was really difficult, but you know what, it was worth it. And I think that's what you want from your life. It's something like, you know what, that was difficult, but it was worth it. And that meant that the adventure was so great that it justified the difficulties. And so then the question is, where do you find the great adventure of your life? It's a mystery. It's going to lay itself out for you. And
it's a mystery. It could be exterminating Jews if you're Hitler. You don't know what the adventure is going to be. There's no set goal of needing to glorify God. It's just going to be discovered by you as you live your life. It's subjective. You never know what it's going to be.
So that's an adventure, because you literally do not know what's going to happen. You have to let go of knowing what's going to happen. And so then you have that adventure, and then what is also the case is that it's you that's having the adventure, right? Because if what you're doing is living in truth, that's you. That truth is you.
Who determines what truth is? For Hitler, the truth was that Jews were going to destroy things, that Jews were going to be bad for society. That was Hitler's truth, but it wasn't true. God determines what truth is, but Jordan isn't trusting in God's revelation to learn what truth is. God's word is truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the word of God. But when you don't have Jesus, anything could be the truth. People can make up their own truth. And for Hitler, his truth was that Jews needed to be exterminated. How does Jordan combat that?
And so that means that whatever happens when you tell the truth is your adventure. We have to develop a vision for our life that is so compelling that it justifies those bitter realities. If you're trying...
the bitter realities of genocide. Oh, it's justified because we're exterminating people who are bad for society. Hitler could say that. No, that's evil. But Jordan has no way of condemning Hitler with his worldview.
Trying to figure out who you are and figure out who you need to be in order to justify the catastrophe of your life.
Hmm.
You have to be tough as a damn boot to be good, because you have to stand your ground when you need to stand your ground, and you have to be able to say no when it's time to say no.
Oh, Hitler needed to stand his ground?
And you have to mean it. And so then you have to think and plan strategically so that when you're going to say no, you can mean it and it will stick. That takes a certain amount of integrated malevolence, I would say.
Ooh.
Once it's integrated, it's not malevolence, it's strength. It's strength of character. It's
Again, who determines what malevolence is? Is malevolence Hitler? Or could Hitler say, I'm not malevolent, I've integrated it properly so that it's strength. The strength that I need to accomplish this task that is the best for the world, to exterminate these people that I consider lower than myself. Come on, Jordan. Give us an objective standard for morality. Oh, you can't. You can't. Until you become a Christian. He needs to become a Christian. Jordan needs to embrace Christianity and God's revelation, the propositions written down in the 66 books of the Bible.
the ability to stand your ground. And you have to cultivate that. And you cultivate that at least in part by telling the truth. It's like the world's an onslaught. You've got the tyranny of culture to deal with.
And who determines what the truth is?
You've got the catastrophe of nature. You've got your own damn malevolence and ignorance, right? All coming at you. Plus the incredible, complicated, indeterminate potential of the future. That's all coming at you. And it's all your responsibility. And if you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you got to mean this. Like, you got to be desperate. This is no game, this. It's like, my life is not everything I want it to be. And perhaps it's not everything that I need it to be. And by need, I mean my life is so unbearable that the suffering that's attendant upon that has made me nihilistic, cynical, bitter, resentful, homicidal, genocidal, unable to have a good relationship.
So here, Jordan is making clear that being homicidal and genocidal is wrong, but we have to ask why. Is it genocidal to kill a bunch of lobsters? Jordan doesn't think that. I don't think Jordan is running a campaign to try to save the world's lobsters, or I don't think Jordan has ever said anything about preserving lobster life and being pro-lobster and or boycotting seafood restaurants. Jordan has not been doing those things, not to my knowledge, and he's a very public figure. How does Jordan determine that genocide is wrong?
Unable to have a good relationship, you ask yourself, you sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something. Like, what's one thing I'm doing wrong, that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? It's like, you meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one.
Maybe Hitler will lie down on his bed and think about what he could fix, and maybe he'll come to the conclusion that he needs to create more efficient killing camps for the Jews. Maybe that's what he'd come up with when he contemplated what he could do better.
What
This is
can
insanity.
you do to improve yourself? Well, let's step one step backwards. The first question might be, why should you even bother improving yourself? And I think the answer to that is something like, so you don't suffer any more stupidly than you have to. And maybe so others don't have to either. It's something like that. You know, like there's a real injunction at the bottom of it. It's not some casual self-help doctrine. It's that if you don't organize yourself properly, you'll pay for it, and in a big way, and so will the people around you. Now, and you could say, well, I don't care about that, but that's actually not true. You actually do care about that.
Hitler could say, well, we'll all pay for it. The world will pay for it if I don't commit these genocidal acts, if I don't get these certain people eliminated from society, then we're all going to suffer for it. Hitler could say that. And he could say, well, I'm going to suffer. I suffer from knowing that these people who are inferior are a detriment to society, and it's suffering for me to experience the knowledge that they're out there being a detriment to society. How do you combat this without the image of God, Jordan? You can't. And everybody thinks that this Jordan Peterson guy is like so insightful, and he's such a star. He's such a public figure that so many people look to. They think he's so great. but he's so philosophically inept. And it's telling that so many people in our culture think that this philosophically inept person is a good person to look to for advice. His worldview falls apart, and the things he's saying are inconsistent, and the things he's saying could be used by mass murderers. How do people not see this? Many people are blind. Many people don't have the Holy Spirit. Many people just don't think very well.
Because if you're in pain, you will care about it. And so you do care about it, even if it's just that negative way, you know. It's very rare that you can find someone who's in excruciating pain who would ever say, well, it would be no better if I was out of this. Sort of pain is one of those things that brings the idea that it would be better if it didn't exist along with it. It's incontrovertible.
When we're talking about pain outside of the Christian worldview, the abuser could always say, well, it's more painful for me to not be abusive than for these people to experience the abuse. It's suffering for me to not abuse people. I want to abuse, and if I don't get to abuse, then I'm in a massive amount of pain. This is what I do. This is how I live. It's discriminatory to me to tell me that I can abuse people. Arguments based on pain don't work outside of the Christian worldview. Again, Hitler could say, there's going to be so much pain for so many people if the Jews continue to exist. If the elderly and the crippled and the sick continue to bring down society, there's going to be more pain overall for more people. That's his opinion. That's his subjective opinion. There's all these subjective opinions. There's all these different opinions. How do you know who's right? How do you know who's wrong? Without the revelation of the God who has given us his law. Without the law that's applied to all people at all times, everywhere, how are you going to say, you better stop because God is watching you? How are you going to say, you better stop? This is actually wrong. Jordan can't do that. So, don't listen to Jordan Peterson. Read the Bible. And when people talk about Jordan Peterson, point out to them how he's philosophically inept and that he doesn't have a good epistemology, a good understanding of how we should know things, or how we should justify our beliefs, and show them that true morality comes from God, and we should always couch all of our advice for how to do things in a worldview that justifies the morality behind doing those things, that gives us the objective to actually move towards with these tools that are given to us. Jordan gives us these tools, but he doesn't give us the right objective that can be justified, and therefore his tools can be used by people like Hitler. So that's the problem with Jordan Peterson.